We continue now at the top of Daf Chavav Amid Beis and Meseches Gittin. This is Gittin Daf 26b. The Gemara continues, Kasha de Rebbe Lozer ad Rebbe Lozer. We have a contradiction within Rebbe Lozer in the Mishnah, and Rashi explains, Kasha de Rebbe Lozer, Reishu Kemes Rebbe Lozer. The Reishu of the Mishnah we said is like Rebbe Lozer. Umachsher Lichtov Tovsei Gittin. And the Reishu of the Mishnah, Rebbe Lozer there is allowing to write the Tovsei Gittin Shelo Lishma. V'Seifa Polig v'Amar Chutz Mi Gittin Nashim. But at the end of the Mishnah, Rebbe Lozer is clearly arguing and saying, with the exception of Gittin Nashim, that by Gittin Nashim you're not allowed to write the Tovsei Gittin Shelo Lishma. And the Gemara answers, Trei Tanoi v'Alibad Rebbe Lozer. There's two Tanoim. It's a Machlokas Tanoim within Rebbe Lozer. Rav Shabzi Amar Chizkiya Mishum Ketatav Rabbi Meir here. Rav Shabzi says that Chizkiya says that it's because of argument, and the Mishnah follows Rabbi Meir. To Amar Eidei Chasima Karti, who says Eidei Chasima Karti. Uvedinu Dafilu Toref Nami Lichtov. And really, you should even be allowed to write the Toref Shelo Lishma if you're following Rabbi Meir, because according to Rabbi Meir, what's important is the Chasima and not the Ksiva of the get. V'zimnin deshama leila sofer de kakasiv, but sometimes the person might hear the sofer writing v'savra iu kamar le, and so she's going to think he, meaning my husband, told the sofer to write the get v'havalo katata b'hadei, and that's going to cause fights between them, and that's the real reason why we don't allow the writing of the Torah shelo lishma, even though technically speaking, according to Rabbi Meir, that should be allowed. Rashi says mishum ketata, meaning mipnei hatakana dekatani. Rashi understands that what the Gemara is saying is when the Mishnah says mipnei hatakana, lava hetera de tovsei koi. That's not going like we explained on the previous Amud. It's not saying that because of the takana, that's why we allow the writing of tovsei gittin. That's what we said on the previous Amud. It was a takana on behalf of the sofrim. We allow the sofrim to write tovsei gittin, even though we should make a gezer. If you can't write the Torah shelo lishma, we should make a gezer not to write the Tovah lishma, but there's a takana on their behalf. That's not what it means. Rather, you shouldn't even need to leave off you should not even need to leave blank the areas of the Torah, but the only reason we leave it blank is to avoid fights. Rabbi Meir, he's a low boy ksiva lishma, because really the Mishnah follows Rabbi Meir that ksiva is not required to be lishma. So you don't need to leave anything blank. And really you don't need to leave the harei muteris blank either. Even in the end, you don't need to leave harei muteris blank. The only thing you need to leave blank is the names mishum katata, because it might cause an argument, a fight. Umakam hazman mishum muktam, and you have to leave the date blank, so it's not going to be predated. And the Gemara continues with a third approach to what the Mishnah means when it says Mimnei HaTakana. Rav Chisda Amar Avimai. Rav Chisda says that Avimai says Mishum Takonas Agunos. What the Mishnah means is a takana on behalf of Agunos as follows: Amri lo Rabbi Meir, V'Amri lo Rabbi Lozer. Some have a version that the Takonas Agunos the Mishnah follows Rabbi Meir, and some have the version that the Takonas Agunos the Mishnah is following Rabbi Lozer. And the Gemara explains Amri lo Rabbi Meir. Some have it as Rabbi Meir to Amar Eidei Chasima Karti, meaning the Mishnah is following the opinion in that line Eidei Chasima Karti. Uvedinhu dafilu Torah nami lichtov, and really even the Torah, the entire get can be written shelo lishma. V'zimnin dehavale katata bahada. However, we're afraid sometimes there might be an argument between the husband and the wife. He'll have an argument with her. V'rasach alav v'zorik le'nehila. He's going to get angry at her. He'll throw her the get. Uma'agen umosivla, and therefore it's going to cause her to be in this situation. He'll abandon her. It's a situation of iguna, and so therefore mishum takonas agunos, we say to leave the Torah blank so that he's not able to just immediately throw it to her and put her in that situation. And Amri lo Rebbe Lozer, some people say the Mishnah follows Rebbe Lozer, and we explain the Mishnah as a takonas agunos. To Amri de Mesira Karti, again Rebbe Lozer says Eidei Mesira Karti. Uvedinu dafilu tofes nami lo lichtov, and so really if you're following Rebbe Lozer, not only the Torah but even the tofes should not be written shelo lishma. We should make a gezer of the tofes because of the Torah. However, v'zimnin deboy lemezel lemedinas hayam, sometimes the husband has to travel far away and he wants to give a get so she doesn't become an aguna. V'lo ashkech safra, but he's not going to find the sofer v'shavik la v'azil u'ma'agin u'mosivla, and again he's going to abandon her, leave her, and she'll be in the situation of iguna. And so therefore, as a takanas agunos, what we say is that we do allow the scribes to write the tofes, and that way gittin will be available in such a situation. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said umokam hazman, the area of the date has to be left blank, so it's not going to be a predated get. And the Gemara says kapasuk v'tani, the Mishnah is learning in all situations lo shna min hanisuin v'lo shna min ha'erisin. It doesn't matter if you're talking about a divorce from the stage of Nisuin from when they're married, or if it's a divorce from the stage of Erusin from when she's just betrothed. B'shlamim and Nisuin. And the Gemara says, I understand by a marriage, so we understand why it can't be predated. Bein lamad amar mishum basachoso ika, bein lamad amar mishum piri ika. Whether the reason is, in terms of the date, do we need a date because of basachoso? What that means is maybe you need a date to get. You need to put the date in the get in order that he doesn't cover up the fact that his wife, let's say his wife happens to be his niece, so he wants to cover up the fact that she committed adultery, so that's why we have to have a date in the get. That way we know when the divorce took place. He can't say she was already divorced at the time of the act of znus. And the other reason for why we have a date in the get is because of piri, meaning from the fruits of the nichsei melug. The husband gets the fruits of the nichsei melug, the property that she brings into the marriage, and so again we need the date in the get to know at what point in time she's actually entitled to get those fruits back. So we understand in those situations it would make sense that a predated Gerisha would be a problem, whether because of the situation of Znus, whether because of the situation of Peros. That all applies to marriage. Elamino Erison, but if you're talking about a Gerishin from Erison, a Gerishin from the stage when the woman is betrothed, so Bishlam Lamadam Mishum Basachoso. I understand according to the one who says Mishum Basachoso, meaning because of the concern of Znus, Iko, so there is a concern of Znus, whether from the Suan or Erison. Elamadam Mishum Piri, but according to the one who says that it's because of the Piri, the fruits of the Nechsei Melug, Arusa, when it comes to a situation of Erison, Mi Isla Piri, is there a din of Peros of Nechsei Melug? There is no halacha of Peros of Nechsei Melug going to the husband during the time of Erison. Rashi says, Arusa mi isla piri, mi isla din piri. Do the laws of Peros of Nichsei Melug apply by Erison? Halo eno ochel Peros. He doesn't even eat the Peros. Elamishas tanai ksuba ve'elach. Only from the time that the conditions of the ksuba set in. It doesn't apply at all during the time of Erison. So why are we concerned about a predated get when it comes to Erison, when it comes to a Gerishin during the stage of Erison? There is no halacha of Peros of Nichsei Melug. And the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Amram says, Hamilsa Shamis Minei de Ula. This matter I heard from Ula. The Amar, he said, Mishum Takonas Vlad. He said it's because of a takona on behalf of the child. V'lo yadana ma'iniv. I didn't know what that was referring to. Rashi says, Mishum Takonas Vlad, hitzrichu laniach mokom zman leget arusa. Because of a takona on behalf of the child, you need to leave the date blank on a get for an arusa. So I heard that from Ula, and I didn't understand what that means. But Kevan de Sham, but when I heard the following brisa, the brisa says, "Omer kisvu get la rusasi." If a person says, "Write a get for my betrothed, lechashek and sena agrashen," and when I marry her, at that point in time, I'll divorce her with this get. Ain't no get, so that's not a kosher get. V'yomer Ula, and Ula said on that, "Matam." What's the reason why that's not a good get? Gezerah shema yomru gita kodem levna, because we have a gezerah. Maybe what people will say is that the get was actually given before she had a child. In other words, when they get married, let's say she gets pregnant, has a child. Now you wrote the get early, so it might be people are going to say that she was already divorced at the time that she became pregnant. That's going to be a pagam for the mishpacha. Hachanami here also, gezerah shema yomru gita kodem levna. We want to make sure that it's not predated anytime we write this get during the Erison, because again, maybe she'll become pregnant later on, and people will say that the get was before the child, even though that was not the case. And so that's the reason why predated is a problem. And Rashi explains, V'lohavi yadana maihi demai vlad yesh la arusa. I didn't understand what's that referring to. What child does an arusa have? Kevan deshamisa lo hadatanya kisvu get la rusasi achshav. Let's say someone says, write a get for my betrothed now. V'lo etnenu lo ad la'achar sheken asan, and I'm not going to give it to her until after we actually get married. So no get, that's not a get. Why? The get yashanu, that's called a get yashan. It's an old get. Shemet esaber kashich nasena, because we're afraid maybe she'll become pregnant when they get married. V'yomru gita kodem levna. People will say the get was actually before the child. Shiyu savurim shenasnu la b'yom shenichtav. They're going to think that the get was given on the day it was written. So achanami b'masnisin, that's the same concern in our Mishnah. Mishamachi tzarech laniach makom zman. That's why you have to leave out the date aflet tofes or arusa, even when you're writing up the star on behalf of an arusa. Shemi yichtov zman lebo bayom, because maybe you'll write the date today. V'lo yigrashenu ad lachar nesu, and then he's not going to actually use it for divorce until they actually get married, until after they get married. V'yomer below kidushin uchsuba nesaber lachar gerish, and then people will think, well, maybe she got pregnant and she was already divorced. There was no kidushin, there was no ksuba. That's how she got pregnant. Upagam hu l'mishpacha, and that's going to be a pagam. That's going to be something that is a disgrace for the family. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Zeir, Amar Rabbi Abba Bar Shila, Amar Rav Hamnuna Saba, Amar Ravada bar Rava, Amar Rav. Rabbi Zera says that Rav Abba bar Shila says that Rav Hamnuna Saba says that Rav Ada bar Rava says that Rav says halacha Rebbe Elazar. The halacha is like Rebbe Elazar. And Rashi says hilchas Rebbe Elazar sheposel betofsei Gittin. Rebbe Elazar says you're not allowed to write the tofsei Gittin gezeira shematorif. In other words, you can't write the ishtaros, the Gittin. Why? Because it's a gezeira. Maybe you'll end up writing the toref. And Rebbe Elazar says that specifically by gerisha. And the Gemara says kari Rav aleh. So Rav called about that. Rebbe Elazar tuvina dechakimi. Tuvina de Chakimi, Rashi says, Mu'usher shebechachamim. Rebbe Elazar is the most gratified of the Chachamim because the halacha follows him. But the Gemara continues, Va'afilu b'shar shtaros nami. Are we saying that the halacha is like Rebbe Elazar also by shar shtaros, by other shtaros? Because Rebbe Elazar said it was only a problem by Gittin Noshim. But by shar shtaros it would be okay. By other shtaros it would be okay to write out these documents. Rashi explains, Va'afilu b'shar shtaros b'mai depolig Rebbe Elazar and Rebbe Yehuda, meaning that which Rebbe Elazar argues in Rebbe Yehuda in the end of the Mishnah. V'achsher b'tovsei shtaros. He says you could write out the tovsei shtaros, meaning the tofes of other shtaros. Amar Rav nami halacha Rebbe Elazar. Does Rav say that the halacha is like Rebbe Elazar in that also, that we're lenient by other shtaros? Bitmia, can that possibly be? But the Gemara says, V'amar Rav Papi mishmei de Rava. But Rav Papi said in the name of Rava, Hay asharto de daini. Rashi says, asharto is kiyum hashtar. The judges would write up a certification of a shtar. Shoedim mi'idin al ksav yedei bezin. The Edom come in, they testify about their handwriting in bezin. Ubezin kozun bo, and then the bezin writes up a document saying it was certified. But most of tlasa avina ve'asu ploni ve'asidu achasimus yadayo. They write up in front of the three of us. Ploni and Ploni came in and they testified about their signatures. And they say that it's certified, it's officially certified, and they sign on that. And so the statement was made, but that by the Asharta de Daini de Michtava Mekame de Sahadi Sadi Achasimus Yadayo. Let's say it's written up before the witnesses actually come in and testify on their signatures, meaning to say similar to our Mishnah. This is a case of Shar Shtaris, and they wrote up the document ahead of time, and then they filled in the details later. Psula, in that situation, we say on the contrary, not like Rebbe Elazar. We say that it's puzzle, we say it's disqualified. Alma michzik shikra. We say that we apply a problem to these shtaros because it looks like it's false. You're writing up these documents before you actually have the testimony in hand. That looks like something that's false. That's no good, and that would seem to be against what Rebbe Elazar says. It would seem to be that by shar shtaros, it would be a problem to write up the tofsei Gittin ahead of time. Hachanami here also michzik shikra. It looks like a lie, and therefore we should not allow it. Not only by gerisha should it be a problem, but it should be a problem by all shtaros. But the Gemara continues Velesa, but it's not really true that we're machmer by other shtaros because it's michzi kashikr, because it looks like a lie. Midir Rav Nachman, from the teaching of Rav Nachman, the Amar Rav Nachman, because Rav Nachman said, Omer Hoyer Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir would say afilu mitzo ba'ash, but even if you find the get, even if he finds it in the garbage, chosmu v'nosnu la kosher. If he then signs it, let's say it happens to have his name and her name, the names are all correct. If he gets it signed and gives it to her, it is kosher. V'afilu rabbanon lo pligi oled Rabbi Meir ela begitei nashim, and even the rabbanon, they only argue with Rabbi Meir by gitei nashim. Diboyinon ksiva lishma, because by gitei nashim you need ksiva lishma. In other words, he found it in the garbage can. It happens to have his name and it has his wife's name, but that's not lishma. So that's why the Rabbanan say it's a problem, and they argue on Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, of course, holds that you need the chasima lishma, you don't need the ksiva lishma, but that's only an argument by gitei nashim because of lishma. Avol b'shar shtaros lo, but let's say it be by other shtaros, it seems it would not be a problem. We would not apply this idea of michzi kashikra, and it would be totally fine. The Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, and similarly along the same lines, Rav Asi says that Rabbi Yochanan says, shtar shalovabo, let's say you have a document, a shtar that you use to borrow with that shtar, upro, and then the borrower already paid everything back, the shtar's already done, it's finished being used. So eino chozer velova, but you can't just use that shtar again, say let's just recycle the shtar for another loan. Shekvar nimchol shibudu, and the reason is because the shibud has already been forgiven. The shibud that this shtar has to be able to collect, it no longer works. Rashi says, "Upro bo bayom." Again, you pay it on that day. Eino chozer velova bo vafilu biyom mil v'rishon. Even if it's the same day, so the date is correct, you can't use that shtar again. Lachar piron delekal mechash lemuktam. There's no concern for a predated shtar. V'achim efarshin ala b'shnayim ochzin. That's what we explained above mitzia. Shekvar nimchol shibuda. But the reason why you can't use the shtar again is because the shibud is batal. Kishapara, once it was paid off, ubatal ashtar. The shtar loses its power. It's nullified. Ve'ena karkos meshubada shuv lemal v'ashniya. The land of the lov is no longer meshubed. There's no longer a lien on the property to the second lender. Shelo alen nechtam shtar zeh, because it wasn't signed. The shtar wasn't signed for that property to that lender. V'havela milva al ped. It has the status now of a loan that was done without a shtar. You can't use that shtar. The shibud was already nimchal. You can't use that shtar a second time. And so the Gemara says, what do we see? The reason why you can't use the shtar a second time, time the nimchal shibudo. The only reason you can't use that shtar a second time is because the shibud has already been forgiven. But again, we see avol mishum shikra lo chayshirin. We see there's no concern that it looks like a lie. We don't say, well, since it was written for a different loan, you can't use it for a second loan because it looks like a lie. That's not really the concern. The concern is nimchal shibudo, and you see that we don't apply this idea of michsi keshikra. Rashi says avol shikra. Emayinechtem al mil v'zu avol bishenechtav kodem halva. Let's say it was signed on this loan. You didn't have a problem of nimchal shibudo, even if it was written beforehand. Kosher in bo bayom nechtav. It would technically be kosher. It would be kosher if it was written that day. And so you see, we don't have this concern of michsi keshikra. We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph.